Good evening, everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting. We were just out grabbing a quick bite to eat, and we all went together, 4 counselors in one car. It was interesting trying to park the car, getting all these different viewpoints on how to do that. So this is, we have quorum, and I'd like to call the Budget Subcommittee for Etobicoke, East York, and York Consultations meeting to order. This is one of a series of meetings that are happening across the city to hear public deputations on the 2018 capital and operating budgets. This session will be taped. You will have 5 minutes to speak, after which point you may be asked questions by the councillors. We're joined by Councillor Janet Davis, the local councillor, and we're joined by Mayor John Tory tonight. Welcome. Are there any declarations of interest on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we'll start with the first deputation. We have about 12 speakers lined up. So the first speaker is Leslie Domenico. Good evening.
Hello.
Yep, right up there. Just put the button on and you're ready to go. And I have a timer here. When it goes off, you'll hear it, and then we'll just ask you to wrap up.
Okay. Hello, my name is Leslie Domenico. I live in Ward 29. I'd like to thank the Budget Committee for giving me the opportunity to be here today to speak to you about the need to fully fund the Transform TO plan in the 2018 budget. I've never made a deputation before. In fact, I typically do my best to avoid public speaking. But something happened over the holidays that compelled me to come here today. My 12-year-old daughter, Rachel, among other things, is a budding environmentalist. She also loves to bake. She was in the kitchen the day before Christmas, making a pie and chatting away as most 12-year-old girls tend to do. She was talking to me about baking and the different times she'd baked with her grandmothers over the years and the things that they had made. Truth be told, I wasn't really listening to her until she made a comment that made me stop what I was doing. Her final remark, before moving on to her next topic of conversation, was that she likely wouldn't get to bake with her grandchildren because the world wasn't going to last that long. Can you imagine hearing those words come out of a child's mouth so matter-of-factly? I didn't know what to say, mostly because I secretly worry about the same thing. I said nothing and let it pass. And so I'm here today to say to you, to urge you to fully fund the Transform TO plan that will work to reduce our city's greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050 and help us avoid increasing surface temperatures beyond those to which we can adapt. To invest in a plan that has already been unanimously approved by City Council. To invest in a plan that will cost the city a fraction of what climate change-related events, such as this year's flooding of Toronto Island or the 2013 ice storm, has already cost the city. A plan that will not only position the city as an international leader on climate change, but create local benefits such as generating an estimated 80,000 person-years of employment. I try to live as lightly on this planet as I can, and I encourage my family to do the same. We live in a small, semi-detached house. We have 1 car that stays in the garage most of the time because we're fortunate enough to live near TTC. We recycle. We don't eat a lot of meat. I know I need to do more. I want to do more, but there's only so much I can do on my own. I need the city's leadership to enable my continued action, to put in place the framework and resources that will help my neighbors and I make our neighborhood a low-carbon one, to create the conditions that will help us switch from gas to low-carbon fuels, and to scale the greening of our homes and our buildings. The decisions you make now will determine Toronto's carbon emissions for up to a century. Approving the Transform TO plan was an important first decision. We now need you to move from good intentions to concrete action and make the decision to fully fund the Transform TO plan in the 2018 budget. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jordan Froese. Nope. Then we have Amy Illingworth of Food Share. Okay, we'll come back to those. Colleen Lynch. Nope. Sit van Brick. Brish. Nope. Oh, I'll have to work on that one. Julian Egglestaff? I'll come back. Yep, I'm going to, sure, I'm going to repeat all of these names before we, Lindsay Jennings. We do have the right list, right? I mean, oh, here we are. Good evening.
Good evening. So I actually just put together a quick little presentation. So while he's getting that ready, I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Lindsay Jennings, and I am a member of Ward 6, as well as I also work with PASAN, which is an agency that works with prisoners with AIDS Support Action Network. I did some previous work with John Howard Society as well. And I also sit on the Lived Experience Advisory Committee for the City of Toronto. So I just kind of want to start off really quickly with just emphasizing your stances as councillors, being representing Toronto. So Councillor Nunziata, you had mentioned basically kind of like your mission statement is that while you believe that the local representatives must be accessible to their constituents, I also recognize that the need to be morally and fiscally responsible to the municipality as a whole. So decisions made by council affect the community as at its core and the individuals that comprise the community. Councillor Justin Giano is not here. So also too, Councillor Mahavik, when you were designated part of the poverty reduction strategy, you made a quote in the Toronto Star saying that we believe that a better Toronto is possible. We believe in the Toronto the good, the Toronto the just, and a Toronto for all. And I think a Toronto for all is very, very important with my presentation. As well too, what was the last one? And Pam McConnell, she was part of the poverty reduction strategy, and I guess one of her main focuses for the poverty reduction strategy was that she wanted a longtime social justice advocate who was willing to fulfill a strategy laid out at council to reduce poverty through housing, student nutrition, and other solutions. I'm actually here to focus around the housing. So next slide. Thank you. So again, I said I was part of Ward 6, the Etobicoke Lakeshore area. I actually live in the Mimico area currently and have since I've moved to Toronto about 6 years ago. So the next couple slides actually are just maps. And I wanted to put in these maps because I wanted to show you what is lacking in South Etobicoke. So the shelters, we see all the blue little dots, which is the downtown core. And then you have the one dot right above Etobicoke, which is a shelter, which is a women's shelter right by Mimico GO Station. Next. So this is meals that are offered within the GTA. So again, all the blue dots in the downtown core and nothing in South Etobicoke. And next, thank you. And so they're your drop-ins. So again, blue dots, all in downtown core. The one dot that you have in Etobicoke is actually LAMP, Community Health Center, and they have an adult program, which is their drop-in program, where they serve some food, but it's not considered a meal. And winter services. So again, blue dots all over the place. And you have, it's hard to see, but you have two blue dots in the South Etobicoke. One is an actual out of the cold service, but the other one is LAMP because LAMP actually gives you tokens to get to the out of the cold program. So it's not actually considered one. And the next. So my little demonstration is that if we don't have housing, everything else that's your safety net. And that's your place where you call home. That's where you feel safe. That's where, that's just your sanctuary. And if you don't have housing, there's many things that can happen. You can go to jail. Your transportation, food security is obviously going to be decreased as well. You might be spending more money on transportation trying to go to different drop-ins and going to different shelters. It's because you have no housing. Employment and education, once again, it's very difficult to maintain housing if you are going back and forth, say, to school. I've lived in a shelter where I've actually had to go to school and live in a shelter at the same time, and it was very, very difficult to maintain that, just your mental health in general, which then leads to your mental health supports. If you do not have a home, your whole day is planned on where you're going to get food, where you're going to find clothes, how you're going to get to these certain places, and then, or what park bench am I going to sleep on? And then OW and ODSP, and I put in hustle there because hustle kind of joins with being involved in the criminal justice system. If you need to hustle, if you need to get involved in criminal activity in order to provide for your family, or provide for yourself, or to find a roof over your head for the night, Those are all going to be part of not having any housing. Also, too, in Toronto South, South Etobicoke, we have the second largest jail in Canada, and there's no men's shelter. So once again, if we went back to the maps and looked at all the dots in downtown core, where we have courthouses, where we have shelters, but we have the second largest jail in Canada and no men's shelter in the area whatsoever. Next. So again, challenges to the South Etobicoke community is that if the Toronto South, once they get bail, the video bail up and running, which is hopefully going to be happening, and it's at full capacity, you're going to have 200 men being released each week in the South Etobicoke area with no men's shelter. We know that 33 to 44%, it's probably closer to 50% right now, are homeless upon release. And then people being released from jail, they're struggling with trying to find employment, trying to get on OW, not having proper ID, the stigma of having a criminal record, of trying to find a job in that case. Also, too, limited resources. So there's no male shelter. It's located, the jail's located on an industrial road beside a gravel pit. And there's not many mental health supports except for LAMP and Reconnect, which does have some safe beds, but they're very limited. And there's strictly for mental health, not mental health and justice sometimes. Next. So again, this is just a little statement around the bail. Oh, there you go. I always put too much information. Totally, yep. So you guys can read through, but the bail is that they want to be able to offer more bail beds within different communities. I know in the Dufferin Eglinton area with John Howard, they do have proposals and they have bail beds built right now. So I think that's to take into consideration. The more people we're going to have being let out on bail, we need a men's shelter in the South Etobicoke area. Again, you have the reintegration center right across the street, huge warehouse. And it's not fully used right now. So you have John Howard in there, you have Margaret's, you have other supports that are in there for people being released from the South. Next.
How many more slides do you have?
About 3. I just went.
Okay.
Really quickly, though, too, I can just sum up all the slides, is that the overdose crisis in Toronto is extremely high right now, and it is an emergency. And we also know that people getting released from the Toronto South Detention Center have a higher rate of mortality, higher rate of possibly overdosing due to the fact that they have been incarcerated. So we need more harm reduction services in that area. And if you want to just go to the very last slide, and then I'm good. So your city budget, I just want to highlight that SSHA and as well as the AHO, they work collaboratively together. So I think that they need to be able to advocate and to pull some of our funding from the budget to create a shelter within the South Etobicoke area that's going to cover your mental health, your harm reduction services, your shelter services, your transitional housing. And then the very last point is the reserve funding of $8.1 million is planned for the acquisition of future shelter sites. So once again, I think that we should look at shelter sites within that area and also this choice-based housing access system. Well, sorry, what is a choice-based if there's no choices? So if we have no housing, then there's no choice.
Good, thank you very much. Questions?
You're supplying that to us? You
Sure.
supply your presentation?
Yeah.
Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, just a question. When you talk about South Etobicoke, are you referring just to the Mimico area?
It's not just the Mimico. I mean, South Etobicoke goes from like your Park Lawn, Lakeshore, all the way down to Long Branch, all the way up to Queensway, right? And so within that area, you have LAMP
Yeah, okay.
and then the South.
Because I'm part of the Etobicoke York Community Council, and there's a men's shelter in my ward.
But that's not close.
But that's
No,
not in my
that's not.
ward. And
Yeah.
so in my ward, there's no men's shelter and a biggest jail and one
Okay, I
community
just
hub.
wanted to clarify
Yeah.
the boundaries. Thank you.
So I have a question. The men that are released from the jail, where do they go now?
So right now, some
Because you
of them.
said 200 are being released, you know.
I said that if the video bail and once they're at
I
full
see.
capacity, you could have up to 200 men being released from the Toronto South. So right now, people that are getting released from the South are going to the John Howard, getting a token to make their way down to the shelters in downtown Toronto. But those are full.
Do you have any actual numbers on upon release, you know, where people are going? Are people going to family and friends, or I mean, is anybody keeping statistics on exactly what's happening to these men?
Yes, so John Howard, Amber Kellen, who is the coordinator at the Reintegration Center, she would have exact numbers up to date just because I'm not at John Howard anymore. I changed jobs, but when I was at John Howard, we would probably have about 20 people being released a week. That was just initially. I know those numbers are up, and once the video bail happens, the numbers are going to increase.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
The next speaker I have is Sarah Earnhardt. No. Jim Purvis. Good evening.
Good evening, dear Budget Committee members. I'm Jim Purvis, a longtime resident of Ward 29. Similar to the first speaker tonight, I'm here to support Transform TO. Thank you for coming to multiple meetings this week to hear our concerns. I understand that at the meetings this week, you've probably heard our neighbors speak to you about needs for poverty reduction programs, transit improvements, shelter beds, and other worthy causes. And I support all those requests, and I commend my fellow citizens who have come here tonight and to the other meetings to express these concerns to you. But the vulnerable group that's on my heart tonight is our future generations, those who are completely without a voice, but who live and must suffer the consequences of the decisions that we make. I do, like this woman's daughter, worry about the world that my grandchildren and their grandchildren will grow up in. A few days ago in Sydney, Australia, the temperature was over 47 degrees Celsius. Last summer, a town in Pakistan hit a temperature of 53.5 degrees Celsius. I don't know about you, but in Toronto, if it's over 30, I find that almost unbearable. I can't imagine a heat wave in the 40s or 50s. And yet that's what people in some parts of our world are already experiencing. And in the not too distant future, Toronto will experience heat waves like that itself. That's the world that we're leaving to our grandchildren's grandchildren. On a lighter note, I wanted to ask you a trivia question. You've no doubt heard in the media about many climate summits that have been held in famous world cities, Paris, Durban, Copenhagen, Rio. But does anyone know where was the first international gathering of climate scientists, where the first international agreements were made to reduce carbon emissions? Pardon? Toronto, yes. Thank you very much. It was in Toronto 30 years ago in June 1988. It was the first, I believe, the first international gathering of climate scientists. Brian Mulroney gave a speech. Doesn't that bring back memories for some of us with gray hair? At that time, Canada committed to greenhouse gas reductions of 20% by 2005. Needless to say, we didn't hit that target. In fact, emissions went up a lot. In the intervening years, there have been a lot of missed targets. The failures of yesterday mean that we must redouble our efforts today. Now, there's many things that are outside of our sphere of control, yours and mine. We here tonight don't have any influence over decisions about Canada's tar sands or pipelines, but we all have a moral sphere in which we can make decisions, as the first speaker referred to, and like her, I've made personal commitments to cut back my own carbon footprint. You, my friends, as our civic officials, have governmental powers to take steps that don't solve every problem, but that go beyond the personal steps that myself and the first speaker have alluded to, and tonight I urge you to use those powers. As you've heard, the city's Transform TO office has prepared a plan for reducing the city's carbon emissions by 80% by the year 2050. They warn us that a lot of work will be necessary to hit that target of an 80% reduction, and considering Canada's disappointing track record of failed targets in the past, we need to take that concern very seriously. To do the hard work of achieving an 80% reduction, they will need to begin immediately. They need to hire staff. Last summer, they advised that a budget of $6.7 million would be necessary for 2018, with further increases in subsequent years. Personally, I suspect that number is still too low. But at any rate, I urge you to grant the Transform TO office the full funding of $6.7 million, not just $2.3 million, the amount that they originally determined to be necessary. In 2018, let us honor the 30-year anniversary of that first climate conference held in Toronto in 1988 by beginning to take seriously the problem that they first identified and made commitments towards. If funding is not available because the city's carrying on other important initiatives that you will hear about tonight and other meetings, then as a homeowner, I'm telling you to increase our taxes. This matter and the other causes that you are hearing about tonight are urgent. Thank you.
Questions? Oh, thank you for coming this evening. Next speaker I have is Rima Burns-McCrone. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Rima Burns-McGowan, and I'm an academic, a researcher, and a writer. And I just want to talk specifically to the importance of funding the Anti-Black Racism Action Plan. 20 years of published research have shown me over and over and over again how deep and destructive is systemic racism and oppression. And attacking that systemic racism is game-changing for communities and for individuals. And although we've had trouble talking about it publicly, anti-Black racism has been a feature of life on Turtle Island for pretty much as long as settlers have been here. So it's absolutely great that the city has adopted the Anti-Black Racism Action Plan, but the plan doesn't mean a thing without the dollars to implement it. The culture change and the systemic change that the plan envisages are critical to ensuring that our city works well for everyone in it. And I really want to stress that it doesn't make the city look progressive to adopt a plan that it then doesn't fund. It just looks and sounds like every other attempt to appear forward-thinking while doing exactly nothing. So, and that is exactly and precisely why Black Lives Matter has been successful as an organization, because appearing to be forward-thinking while doing exactly nothing won't cut it anymore. The funding, the action part of the action plan is critical. And because it's urgent now and relevant to these budget consultations, I actually want to talk for a moment about a case that's unfolding, not in Toronto directly, about the case of Abdul Abdi, a child who was failed by systems that are not different because they're located in Nova Scotia and not in Toronto. Abdul, for those of you who don't know, was born in a refugee camp in Djibouti where his family had escaped a war. He lost his mother at a young age. She was admitted to Canada along with his family, but she couldn't make the trip, and she died shortly afterwards. Shortly after he arrived here, he was taken into care and cut off from the only adult who loved him and wanted the best for him. This was done by the Canadian state. He was bullied at school. He was shunted over the course of his childhood to 30 or so foster homes where he suffered abuse. And although he ran away like Cheney Wenjack, and we know what happened there, he was returned again and again by the cops. Unsurprisingly, he ended up in prison, and because of that is now facing deportation because his aunt was not allowed to apply for Canadian citizenship on his behalf, and the folks who were allowed to chose not to. Justin Trudeau said on this case earlier today that mistakes were made by the folks in care who never got around to applying for citizenship for Abdul. He also said that Abdul made mistakes as a kid in care, and that, frankly, a lot of kids in care do make serious mistakes. So Abdul should never have been taken into care in the first place, and that the adults in his life made mistakes should not result in at this point in his being deported to a country he doesn't know, where he doesn't have family, and whose language he doesn't speak. If kids in care often make serious mistakes, what does that say about the child welfare system, particularly for a child who is Black and Muslim? In short, we know that these systems that acted in loco parentis the child welfare system, the education system, the criminal justice system all failed him, and we know that they are all rife with anti-Black racism. As Trudeau loves to say, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Canada made Abdul Abdi who he is, and today he is as Canadian as all of us in this room, as you or I or Justin Trudeau, in every way that counts, except that he doesn't have the paper. It's just another example of the way that anti-Black racism destroys lives. This is not a nice to do. This is a critical, way past its due date, urgent must do. You can't wait. You have to fund the Anti-Black Racism Action Plan. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you for your deputation. Next speaker I have is Alejandra Ruiz Vargas of Acorn. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
How was everybody tonight?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Actually, it's been a standard here. Give me a momentum because always when I do deputations, I sit down. So I really like it. So I'm from Acorn. Acorn is an organization from low-income and moderate-income people who fight for social change. So in November 2017, the city made a commitment to ensure that more children, to ensure more children space for daycare and as well the reduction of the fees up to 50%. The city adopted Acorn $10 and change campaign, a geared to income fee of $10 a day daycare, and a childcare more accessible and a childcare more fair. That day, the room was filled with so much hope that the committee chair allowed us to clap. It was a memorable moment. Well, this was a fairy tale because we found out a scene called New and Enhanced Not Included. So I asked to my organizer, or to our organizer, John Anderson, what does this mean? And he nervously laughed and said, the city didn't maintain the commitment. We, Acorn, are feeling very disappointed. We're feeling that something is broken. The city again and again failed us. We wondered what is the true agenda of the city. Spend our time? Send us home with fake hopes and then do whatever they want? This mood is unacceptable and low. We are here today to ask what happened to the money. Where is the money that you promised to us? The city clearly don't care about children and their parents. They call it Toronto a progressive city. A truly progressive city is the one that takes care of all the needs of their citizens. Somebody who have to be accountable for this action. We are tired to be zero unto your eyes. But well, hey, the taxes are very welcome. City of Toronto, get your act together. We are calling to the people of the city for an action. Don't allow the city to treat us like a puppets. Again, we call it to the people of Toronto to do an action. Stop the excuses from our officials. That day on November, when we clap of happiness, was a waste of time and resources. We call it again to the responsible people of the city to think twice when you're going to vote in the next coming election. And I will finish with this. As they say, we should don't drive high. Please don't vote high on high expectations that never going to be fulfilled. Vote responsible.
Thank you for your deputation. Questions? Councillor Davis has a question.
I know you're anxious to move on. So the childcare budget that's here, and I agree with you, I was disappointed when I saw it as well, has $12 million actually provided by the provincial government, and yet that 825 fee subsidies is not in the budget. So I assume, though, that at some point someone is going to put it in the budget, but there still are 12,000 families on the waiting list.
Yes.
So you have suggested a sliding scale and a $10 a day. It's going to be some time to get to that. The other, if at all, but certainly is a target, there was additional money that was going into the base budgets to bring down the fees for all families as well. That is also a contribution that the city should have and could have made. So I guess I'm asking how you think that, what should this budget committee do? Put the money in the budget that...
Put the money in the budget, of course. Like make the correction and say, oops, we made a mistake. Oh, it's okay. So but put the budget, isn't it? Because we can make mistakes. Put the budget and the money, that's it. This is what we want.
And the city committed to 20% matching of the funds that the federal and provincial government has given us, and that also is not in the budget. So I guess you would be asking the budget committee and council
to please put the money in the budget. So this is why we are here, to ask you, where is the money, when you're going to put it, and we need it. We really need it.
Right, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for your
Thank you.
deputation. Next speaker I have is Justin Van Det. Good evening.
Good evening. Members of the Budget Committee, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and for doing your consultation meeting here in East York. I want to focus my remarks this evening on transportation and taxes, which I believe are important issues to the people in this community and across the entire city. I'm thrilled that Smart Track is moving forward and is fully funded in the capital budget. Being able to move across the entire city is very important on so many fronts, especially jobs. And it's opened up important discussions with the senior levels of government, and the fact that the province has committed billions to the project is a good thing. Making the main subway station at and the Danforth GO station into a true transit hub has a lot of potential, especially with the number of high rises that are located in the community and the proposed developments that we're seeing talked about in the Danforth area. I note this development because hopefully the transit hub will convert into something what I would like to see, and I'm sure many others would like to see, some form of an underground passage between linking the two stations. Expensive, yes, but an important project to build for sure. I applaud the mayor and the council for stepping up and taking it all the way from just an idea into a real doable plan that will enhance the city that we love. On the issue of taxes, keeping the tax increase as low as possible is important, and that's why I would encourage the council to not go above the proposed 2.1% amount. This is important because the affordability of the city is important, and there have been so many things rising above the costs and so on and so forth, and I think it's important that we try and keep it as low as possible. I don't believe that there's an appetite, as some councillors have alluded to, that people can just afford to pay more. I also want to touch on something that as it relates to bicycle lanes. And where that would fall within the budget, but there are certainly a lot of rumblings about future plans and the potential for the Danforth Avenue bicycle lanes and so on and so forth. The potential of ripping out lanes of traffic on major streets like Danforth Avenue is not something that I support, and there does not seem to be an appetite by many of the local business owners who I know and speak to regularly. On the budget process, if I may, by wrapping up, I did find it a little difficult to find a phone number on the website to register to depute tonight. I actually had to go to the star.com and find the phone number. Great information on the dates listed, but hard to maneuver and find a phone number and a email address. So I just thought out of respect, just pass that along to staff, because I know they've also done a lot of work, great work in the process. I also want to commend and congratulate the Budget Committee, because I know it's a lot of work by staff and all of you. And I do want to single out Councillor Mihevik for the work that he's been doing on his work with the Armory, and I applaud all of the council and the mayor for taking the steps that took place to take some action.
Good. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis has a question.
Thanks for coming, Justin. I wanted to ask you about the doable plan for having an underground passage between the Danforth station and Main. I'm just wondering where you heard that, because we've just Metrolinx has just completed the study, and that is not in the plan. So.
Well, no, I would like to add something that I would like to see come to fruition and get built. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people in that community would like to see built.
Oh, okay.
I think you misheard me.
Oh, I thought you said you were commending that. Okay. And one of the challenges with those connections, and all of us also who are in this area hope that there can be a way to connect and use use the connection between Main and or the Danforth station as almost a relief line.
Correct.
Because right now, when you get to Bloor and Yonge, it's very difficult to get on the Yonge line. There was a pilot project in which people could get both a Metro Pass and a Go Pass, and it was not successful. And the reason was that it was not affordable. And so the integrated fares are what we're going to need to make that kind of use of RER or Smart Track successful. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for us or to the provincial government on integrated fares.
I mean, I think the integrated fare is a great idea. I think a lot of work needs to happen to sort of see that through, and I think there just needs to be a lot of communication, I think, to promote the initiative and promote the cause. I know I don't want to sound like I'm going off topic, but like I know the Presto initiative, you know, where there's encouragement for the time-based transfers. I believe it's 2 hours on the condition that you have a Presto card. And that's something where what I would like to see, you know, it should be for everybody that's using the system, not just the Presto users, because I've heard the percentage of users is actually quite low. Going back to and how you can integrate the two stations there at Main, I think it just requires an awful lot of work on communication by the city government, by the province. I mean, it is so much of a big relief that there's a provincial partner today who are able to, you know, who are actually making big investments into public transit.
So it is not being recommended by Metrolinx.
Right.
But in any event, integrated fares.
Yeah.
Do you support integrated fares on a fare by distance or flat rate, or?
I support an integrated fare so that if someone wanted to hop out of Main and Danforth and go down the GO line, if they're traveling within the limits of the city, you should be able to pay a TTC fare.
At a TTC fare?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
Is Jordan Froese here? No. Is Amy Illingworth here? No. Colleen Lynch? Sitvan Brick? No. Julian Engelstaff?
He's at Chester Station.
He's getting closer. Good. Excellent. That's progress. It's good. Sarah Earnhardt? Oh, okay.
And my apologies, there was an accident at Coxwell Gerard with a street car and a car. I was on the 22 getting down and back up again. I just, my apologies and thanks everyone.
That's okay.
Thank you also to the mayor for being here because I know there's deputations downtown as well. So it's very nice that you came here. Hi, my name is Sarah Earhart. I'm wearing 3 hats today. My first hat is the community co-chair of the S.H. Armstrong Pool Working Group, which is a working group that was convened by council during last year's budget process. My second hat is the administrator of the Toronto Eastenders for Childcare Group, which is a group of around 300 parents in this neighborhood looking for improvements for the accessibility, affordability, and quality of childcare in the East End in particular. And my third hat is as a parent, a resident, and taxpayer. So just quickly, I'm going to just read some snippets from a letter that's being submitted on behalf of the community members of the S.H. Armstrong Pool Working Group. Again, this is the group that was convened. We're looking to have funding reinstated in the 2018 budget. As a reminder, just because we are back in the snow, we held a rally last year in support of our pool. Really, since forming in May 2017, I'm reading directly from our letter now, our working group has fostered linkages across diverse communities, city staff, and the TDSB to refine aquatic programming at the pool in line with community needs and also to make modest facility improvements in partnership with the TDSB. So in working in partnership with TDSB and Toronto Lands Corporation, they were able to make investments in the pool. We were able to tweak the programming to align with what's happening in our community, which is a real resurgence of young children. And so the need more than ever for Learn to Swim programming. And with these things, within just a few months, we were able, and some targeted community outreach, we were able to have great results. We doubled pool participation, more than doubled pool participation in fall months. We've, again, more than doubled pool participation in the winter. The pool's now open 7 days a week and includes drop-in programs, private programs, targeted Learn to Swim, women's nights. There's a lot going on at this pool. And I have to say, the feeling you get when there's new life in a community space is just phenomenal. It's great to come and meet my neighbors. On the Monday night Learn to Swim program, we have some new Canadians that are there learning to swim alongside moms like me who are postpartum and trying to swim laps. It's a really great way for a gentrifying neighborhood to come together and for our families to connect and to meet. And so I can't stress enough how important this pool is to the dynamic and framework of our community. And I want to thank you for convening our working group, and I really hope you'll reinstate funding in this budget. I'm going to move really quickly now. Toronto East Enders for Childcare. There have been other people speaking on childcare, I know here and also at City Centre. Our group stands in solidarity with ACORN. We support what ACORN is asking for. We've been advocating in all orders of government. We put forward a petition in the House of Commons tabled by our MP. This year, specifically talking about the cost of childcare in Toronto's East End. We deputed related to the childcare growth strategy. We were so supportive of this council coming together, and we would really like to ask that we keep to those commitments, that we fund that childcare growth strategy, and that we keep moving forward. It may not be in time for my son, but it has to be in time for all of the other families in my neighborhood and across this city, so that we can all access childcare, families of all income levels. I'd also just ask in that too, one thing that my group, Toronto East Enders for Childcare, considered very important was the wait list, the centralized wait list, which was a very low cost but very important component to alleviate some of the stress and the burden at the front end, in addition to the 20% funding, which I know is a larger ask, but is one that we really need to have all orders of government at the table and enhancing their support of childcare on an ongoing basis. My last comment, and thank you very much for your time, is as a resident and a taxpayer, and I just, this year in particular, I'm just struck. We lost a political leader this year, Deputy Mayor Pam McConnell, and I'm not a budget expert, but in looking, I see that the poverty reduction strategy funding is also not there. I know that was something she championed, and it's just so important to me as an upper middle income earner in this city to see all people in our city and our community to be able to live lives of dignity and opportunity. And so I think the poverty reduction strategy is really important. My families like mine, would be happy to pay more in tax to see important initiatives like this get funded. We want these initiatives. We want everyone in our communities to have access to city services. We get great value for money with our city services. We're delighted with the swim programs in our neighborhood. We're delighted with the quality of the childcare center in our neighborhood.
Can I just get you
meal
to
programs,
wrap up?
yes, of course, they're wonderful, and it's so important that our programs can continue to meet the demand. And for that, we would be willing to pay more. And so thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Sure, Councillor Mihevik.
Your position on taxes and you willing to pay more, do you think in your circles that's a majority opinion, minority opinion, 50/50? Because that sometimes is the elephant in the room when you're talking about budgets, is how big's the pie before we start to divide it up?
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent question. I think when you ask anyone, do you want to pay more in taxes outside of a context, it's often difficult. I think what strikes me every time is when I see that little chart that the City of Toronto puts out, and I see where each little bit goes, and I'm astounded by how little goes to things like my libraries, like just how very little I am putting forward for something that I get so much out of, and how much I would love to be able to go with my child to the library on a Sunday, for example. Just how much we get for those investments. I grew up in the Maritimes. We also pay lots of taxes in the Maritimes at all orders of government, and just the value that we get in the City of Toronto is phenomenal for what we put in. And I think if it's framed in terms of what the individual contribution, which for me on a monthly basis compared to some of the increases in fees I'm seeing, for example, my childcare fees went up by more than 15% this year, which for me is in the hundreds of dollars a month. When we're talking about dollars a month in the context of the city budget, I'm dumbfounded by how much I can get for that increase in funding, and I would gladly contribute.
Okay, thank you for your deputation. Councillor Nunziata, then Councillor Davis.
So just on that point, you made a number of recommendations that you want to see back in the budget. So if we were to put all the new enhanced back into the budget, we're not just talking a small tax increase, we're talking double-digit tax increase. So you're willing to pay that much?
So for me, a 10% tax increase in 1 year, and I don't want to. I'm saying this for my house. I can't. Someone has to do economic impacts. 10%, but that would be around $25 a month that I'd be paying an additional. As I said, I'm paying around $150, $175 additional in childcare fees this year alone, with more expected next year. And so when we start thinking about all of the services and other models, it's just really important. Many of the things being proposed are incredibly important, and I think we can find a way.
But there are a lot of people that cannot afford $25 a month.
I respect that.
So you
I respect that.
You have to look at the big picture. Thank you.
I respect that.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Just to be clear, what's not included in the budget? Net, because there's a column that says
There's a question that's following
there
this
is.
premise.
Here's funding from another source.
Yeah.
Is 42 million, which is 1.5%. So it's nowhere near double digit. But putting that aside, much of what's in this not included is zero net, meaning someone else is funding it, particularly on the childcare section.
That's my understanding, but yeah.
Yes. So how would you explain to parents that we have all this money from the federal and provincial governments that it's not in the budget for 825 new fee subsidies, affordability operating grants, $1 million, operating funding for the family and child centers, which we've been downloaded, frankly, but given 100% of the operating costs, not in the budget, even though we have the revenue.
Councillor Davis, you're going to allow her to answer her question?
How would you tell parents home child care affordability is not funded $3 million when we got money from other levels of government, and expansion and new special needs resources not included? How can we explain that to parents at the East End who are paying $1,600 to $2,000 a month for childcare? Affordability money not spent, and the city not committing its 20% share that it committed to last year twice.
Yes, and I would say that for parents, it's difficult, and this is a difficult hour for parents to come and join, especially with the traffic, because all of our little ones are just getting out of childcare, and we're scrambling all around the city. So it's difficult, but I'd also say it's difficult with other orders of government. So when our group, because we understand that all orders of government have to be at the table for something like childcare, when we're going to the other orders of government and we're talking about the needs, and money is on the table, essentially,
Yes.
it will make our work more difficult to help our city be a primary recipient of funding, which it ought to be from all orders of government on this issue, including our city. So everyone has to do their share for this to work. And I will be there, parents will be there to continue to advocate for that.
Thank you.
I have a question with a shorter premise.
Thank you.
I did use the opportunity.
How,
Sorry.
So how many children do you have in daycare?
I have one.
One. And how much do you pay a month in daycare?
I pay $1,650 a month for preschool.
You pay $1,600.
Yeah, and I've been on wait lists for years for other areas. Since before I moved to Toronto. I was living in Sweden when I first got on the wait list for here. And I deputed on this last year and with the City of Ottawa and their centralized wait list system.
That's the cost of an apartment rent.
For one child. And I have here printed the cost of care. That's in a private for profit. I have the cost of care printed for City of Toronto. Which I think is a great barometer because this is where people are being paid a living wage,
so is
where
that,
high quality care.
Is that
Yeah.
about $80 a day you're paying?
Yeah, something like that.
Is that
It's in a church basement. I mean,
Okay.
it's private for profit, but
Sure.
what we picture and what we're doing
Sure.
in the East End can be very different. We're in a church basement.
Okay.
We have to leave at 5:30 because the space is rented out for a karate program. These are my fees are 100% of the cost of that childcare. Unlike what would happen for university tuition or other programs, that's what it costs, and
I'm
that's
just
what I
trying
have
to
to
understand the
pay.
economics. I gather that the child care organization has to rent the basement, do they?
They rent the basement. They pay for staff.
And what's the staff-child ratio?
Staff to child ratio is 8-to-1 for preschool.
It's 8-to-1.
So they have 24.
So it's 8-to-1.
It's 8-to-1.
So
There's an administrator. There's licensing fees. I know, but it's.
I don't understand how it's so expensive. It's 8-to-1. It's
Well, it's you know.
It's a lot.
It's a real challenge in our neighborhood.
Child care workers are not paid a lot.
Well, you know, I will
say
say
that.
that in a system that is not public, it is a Pandora's box. So it is lovely that we have public childcare centers that can give us a barometer for the costs across the city, but I can't delve into that. But I can say, based on our barometer, the preschool fees are $72 a day for City of Toronto licensed childcare facilities across the city. So that gives a good aggregate what it would cost for a full fee paying parent. It's $95.16 a day for toddlers, and it's $106.90 for infants.
Okay.
And so $28,000 is what we presented to the House of Commons this year for the cost of childcare in Toronto.
Thank you for the information. Thanks for your deputation.
No problem.
Okay, then the next speaker I have is Tom McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom McLaughlin. I live in the East End and the beaches, and the TTC is my sole means of transit. I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak on my topic, the Affordable Care Pass. The announcement that the city will implement a fare pass is welcome news. At last, we have a fare reduction plan for all lower income riders. My joy, however, would be more complete if there was also an allocation in the budget for it. If there's not, then we can say with King Lear, nothing will come of nothing. In Phase 1, the discount for passes and single fares granted to ODSP and Ontario Works recipients would make the cost of transit a lesser but still substantial burden. A single Ontario Works recipient gets only $280 a month to cover all expenses, including transit. To gain access to basic needs such as food banks, meal programs, appointments with employment or social service agencies, they would need to pay a smaller but still substantial part of their income, or as they do at present, they would need to walk. Given the inadequacy of their income, any transit fare is too high. The fares and most humane action would be to give ODSP and Ontario Works recipients free passes and fares. The TTC has already budgeted a total of $7.6 million from 2018 to the end of 2021 for Phase 1. Giving free passes and fares to ODSP and Ontario Works recipients would have a minor effect on an operating budget of $1,822,421,000, but it could have a powerful effect on welfare recipients. And while we're on the subject of free fares, we should implement one other measure. During extreme heat and cold alerts, drivers should be instructed not to ask for fares so that riders can ride free to cooling and warming centers. One other point. Why does the program have to be doled out in 3 stages, like water given in spoonsful rather than a glass to a thirsty person? Why should people in Phase 1 have to wait a year after why should people in Phase 2 have to wait a year after people in Phase 1 to get their discount? Why should people in Phase 3 have to wait 2 years? Why couldn't all 3 phases be rolled out at once? The cost of a Metro Pass with a 21% discount would be approximately 6% of the income of an unattached individual at the low income measure plus 15% mark. Better than the current price, but still a substantial sum for someone for whom every dollar counts. Wouldn't it be better to offer those at the low income plus 15% mark a $50 Metro Pass with a $1 fare? This would allow them more freedom to go to food banks, to keep appointments with doctors, employment and social services. They could better afford food and other necessities. It would make it less costly for them to travel to work. They could more easily visit with friends. They would be better connected with their community. The Fair Pass proposals are welcome, but if the pass is to be truly fair, we need bolder measurements implemented now.
Thank you for your deputation. Any questions? No. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming and speaking.
Okay.
So we have one more name on the list. Julian Engelstaff. Ta-da! Drum roll. Made it.
Welcome.
Thank
you very much for your patience.
Sure. Good evening.
My name is Julian Engelstaff. Thank you for hearing me today. I was incensed when I read media reports that Metrolinx is asking for $5 million to implement the 2-hour time transfers for Presto. I've worked in software and database IT for about 20 years, and I'll explain why this practically made me I completely lost it. The fact is, as you may be aware, 2-hour time transfers already exist in the Presto system for the TTC. If I take my Presto card and I go to Coxwell Station down the street and I tap it, it deducts $3. And if I ride to Dufferin Station, exit the station, go up to the street, wait for the Dufferin bus, when I tap on Dufferin bus, it deducts $0 because it's been less than 2 hours since I tapped on at Coxwell. Now, it's true, there is one catch to this. If you re-enter Dufferin Station and tap, it will deduct another $3 because it is aware that the Dufferin bus and the subway station are transferable routes. You can't re-enter the subway, that's not a transfer. But all it's doing is it's checking 2 hours, yes. Do the routes intersect? Yes. That's it. So they're not having to implement anything new. And as a software engineer, this just drives me crazy that they say it's going to take them $5 million worth of work to remove one instruction, which is check whether these routes intersect. That's it. They don't have to do any new engineering work, no new design work, no new anything. All they have to do is remove the tiniest bit of instruction. The easiest thing you can do in software is turn something off. It's practically, the only thing easier is doing nothing. So the council should flatly reject the $5 million price tag. This should cost 95% less, at least. And you can put that money towards affordable transit passes or more shelters for the homeless or whatever council agrees is the best use of the money. I realize that's a complicated political question. But one thing that I think is a dead easy question is you should not pay $5 million for 2-hour time transfers on Presto. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad, you might have some questions. I'm glad you made it here on time.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. You know, I think that it's perhaps the people at Presto or Metrolinx are unhappy because we pay a fairly low transaction fee. I think one of the lowest transaction fees. And they're still trying to nail us on a higher
Sure.
fee. Are there any questions from councilors? Councilor
A
Davis?
rhetorical one.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go and make a deputation to Metrolinx,
Oh.
would you?
Well,
It's rhetorical because you can't.
I might not be so polite, but yeah. To the point that they are trying to gouge you because maybe they don't think you're paying enough on other things. I think it all comes down to the old adage that the price of something is simply what people are willing to pay. And if council just flatly refuses to pay this, like, if you're willing to pay it, if there isn't enough political will on council to just tell them to go shove it, then you'll end up paying it. But it's absurd if that's what happens.
Okay, thank you for your deputation and for the sage advice. Thank you. Okay, so that, is there anyone else that would like to come and address the Budget Committee? Subcommittee? No? Yes?
I'm not registered.
That's okay. You come up, we'll give you 5 minutes, say.
Expecting to be waiting in line for people to speak, and of course, the room was locked and no one was here, so I'm glad you're staying a bit later and able to hear me. I didn't register for the morning session either. My remarks are totally off the cuff. But I agree with many speakers here tonight who say that we simply must increase funding for the city. And I am here in total support of the concept of raising property taxes. Several people have mentioned here tonight in a positive vein, and I want to add my voice to that. I think we get a bargain for our services. My wife and I are seniors. We do yoga. It's virtually free. In fact, it is free. It's terrific. As seniors, the services we value are transit and community services and the libraries. And we really like to see more, funding for libraries. Another thing that's an issue that I think that city staff is very good at, but maybe a little overworked, understaffed, is the city planning department. There's a lot of work going on, planning work and construction, design in our end of the city right now. And the planners are doing this, I must say, are very good. They seem to work very long hours. I'm retired now, but I know the effort they put into putting these presentations together, to getting the information together, to anticipating questions. They do a great job. And there's very few of them. It always seems to be the same ones all the time. I think they could use some help. And I think one way to help them is simply raise our property taxes. I think that if there is a severe case of hardship, there is already a rebate program for seniors who can't pay property taxes increases. I think if the City Council needs to find other ways to help people who cannot handle a sizable increase, and I'm talking at least 50%. I think it can easily raise property taxes 50% this year and 50% next year. I think you could double them, and I think most of the city could afford it, with some sacrifice for some people, more or less for others. And then I think you should look at, forget the freezing property tax. Nothing freezes in this world. The cost of everything and the value of everything goes up. We should be following that. There's no reason we have unhappy civil servants, for instance, or unhappy unionized workers who have to go on strike to get what they want. We should be able to pay them good wages. We should be able to cover the city's finances with the base that's most equitable. And while I'm here, and I'm so glad Mr. Tory came here, Mayor Tory, because this year Mayor Tory proposed, and I think a lot of council members here supported it, bringing in toll roads. And I just want to say I'm sure glad that Queen's Park defeated that, because they are unfair and unequitable. They're only paid by drivers. I think the only fair way of taxation is taxation for, if you're talking about the whole city, is property taxes. The other tools you have, hotel taxes, why not? You pay a fortune for hotel taxes in Montreal and New York City. Lots of places. There's other incremental. You could bring back the car tax probably, and I don't think too many people would suffer from that. Thanks for hearing me. I hope I haven't taken my 5 minutes. I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you for coming. Thanks for your deputation. Okay. Okay, I guess if there's no one else that would like to speak, we will just conclude our proceedings here, and I have a motion that the Budget Subcommittee for Etobicoke East York Civic Center consultation receive for information the public presentations and communications submitted by members of the public. All in favor? That concludes our session here in East York. It was a pleasure coming out to East York. Councillor Davis, Councillor Fragadakis, nice to be out in the East End. Thank you all for coming and making your deputations.